And welcome to this Rangers Review interview special. I'm Derek Clark, of course, and I'm joined by Rangers TV's finest and distinguished author, Tom Miller. How are we doing, Tom?
I'm very good, thank you, Derek. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no, it's great to have you on. Interested to hear about your story, Tom, of course, how you get into the broadcasting and, of course, your Rangers story as well. In terms of the commentary, was that something you always fancied doing from a young age?
No, to be honest, Derek, I had no ambition in that regard whatsoever. And it almost came about, well, it did come about by default. I was doing some stuff for a radio station called Scott FM.
Yeah.
Going back a number of years. And an opportunity arose through a company called IC Scotland, which was the Mirror Group. And it was the early days of the internet. And a previous disc jockey or presenter at Scott FM had moved on to IC Scotland. And he'd been in communication with Rangers with a view to broadcasting a game live on the internet. It had never been done in Scotland up until this point. So we were going back to 1999. And the trial game was Ian Ferguson's testimonial against Sunderland at Ibrox, and it was audio only. I'd been asked to be involved. Someone else was to commentate, and 3 days before it, they couldn't do it. They had to pull out. So I was thrown in at the deep end, and I had the option at that time to embrace it and enjoy it, or the opportunity might never have come forward again. So did I fancy it? Yeah. Did I have reservations? Yeah. Did I have any notion to do it for the sustainability that I have now for in excess of 23 years? None whatsoever. So every day I reflect on that opportunity back in 1999 and appreciate it. I believe I'm really fortunate and honoured, privileged to be able to do it all these years later. And it is, it's just great fun. You know yourself. Yeah. I think one great broadcaster in Scotland who's just retired from being the stadium announcer at Hearts, Scott Wilson, who was a terrific radio presenter in the day, used to say, broadcasting in any shape or form is the most fun you can have with your clothes on. And I thought, it's not a bad line, Scott. And well, I don't 100% agree. It certainly is an experience. The whole preparation to get the thing going, as you know yourself from your experience, the sense of anticipation when somebody in your ear starts the countdown to live, and then you're off the edge of the cliff at that stage, and it's easy to dig a hole you just can't find the reverse. So it has its own challenges, but a privilege to be able to do it for such an extended period, and to do it for the greatest club in the world. Oh, that's a bonus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, most definitely is. And in terms of Rangers then, Tom, is it a club that you followed from a young age?
Yeah, I think I first went to Ibrox in the days of Richie Shearer Caldo, Greg McKinnon, Baxter, Henderson, McMillan, Miller, Brandon Wilson. My first cup final was against Dundee when they wore the blue and white vertical stripes. So, it's been a journey which I embraced from a very early age in the early 60s. I'm very privileged again. I was taken by an uncle who had members tickets, which is the Waddle Suite as we know it now. And he would go along with a couple of cronies. And if there was space in the car, I was very fortunate to get taken along with them. And my uncle at the time drove a Jaguar. He was a fishmonger in Coatbridge. So you can imagine he did all right, particularly on Fridays. And it was just it was an introduction at the top end of the fan experience. Parking in the Albion, as was the training ground at that time. Walk across the road with the Jaguar with the parking permit on the windscreen, up the stairs and into the Waddle Suite, as it was known then, the Members Club. So it's always been a bit special from that first experience of it. Then having a season ticket myself and travelling from a home in Coatbridge. Yeah, you're right. There's not that many blue noses originally from Coatbridge, and you would take the blue train. It'd be a good thing. and then the subway out to Ibrox. So I've had various exposures to Rangers Football Club, the good, bad, the indifferent, all the way through to the trauma of 2012 and beyond in the lower leagues as well, where you're basically pioneering in places like Elgin and Brecon and everywhere else along the way. So it's been some experience over the years.
Yeah, certainly. And of course, can you remember much about that first game you covered, Tom, that testimonial? Anything that sticks out?
The fellow who was meant to do it, it just didn't work out. So I was thrown in at the deep end, and I recruited an old friend of mine, Colin Jackson, who I had been friendly with for, at that time, probably 20 years. So I knew Colin particularly well, and I knew he'd be a real safe pair of hands and someone that the fans could relate to. And remember, it was very early days of the internet, so it was the old dial-up, and people didn't stay on for the duration of the broadcast. They would dip in and out as they would dial in and out of they say, dial-up rather than broadband base. And Colin was such a great safe pair of hands. Over 500 games for the club, joined as a 15-year-old, played the majority of his career there, except a short spell at Morton and Partick Thistle, I think, very late on in his career. So it was terrific to have that experience on hand to go to during the game. And very quickly I realised this is just like a couple of mates chatting down the pub, but what a privilege to be actually being able to talk about your club along the way. So, I miss Colin a lot. He was a great friend, and we used to meet up regularly. For lunch, we would go to the Stirling Castle for lunch, which incidentally, not the iconic Scottish monument. It's a boozer behind the Kelvin Hall. And we would go there regularly, and life was just talking about Rangers, going back to when he played at the club in the 70s. So a real icon of Rangers, and still greatly missed. He was hugely influential on things like the former Players Benevolent Fund becoming a charity. He obviously 50 years ago, just the other day, was the anniversary of Barcelona. Colin should have played, rolled an ankle in the final training session, didn't play. We already had lost Rory McKinnon in that campaign to a broken leg. So for someone who was so deeply rooted in the whole Rangers culture, that was probably one of the biggest frustrations he ever faced in his career. And I shared that with him because we were pals, effectively. That he didn't get to play in that final. But he was a terrific Ranger. And on that first ever broadcast, I couldn't have asked for someone to steer me through the choppy waters of unknown territory of football commentary than a Rangers great in the form of Colin Jackson.
Yeah, certainly. And was there anyone that perhaps helped you or guided you, Tom, in the early days, or was it very much a sort of learning the job?
Pretty much learning on the job, Derek, to be honest. And then when other opportunities came, you learned a wee bit more about the technical side of it, how it all came together. In those early days, purely internet, you were flying with the seat of your pants. So one thing that can't be taken away is I was the genuine first voice on the internet to commentate in Scottish football. So that's something that I consider to be a great privilege as well. But when I moved on and later did some stuff at many other broadcasters, including Radio Clyde and Radio Forth in Edinburgh, Scott Sports Atlanta and others, and you understood the psychology of it. You get a better understanding of the parts that others played in it. And I have to be honest and say, guys like Paul Cooney, terrific broadcaster, he would be hosting a programme, you'd be commentating. He would listen to BBC Radio Scotland in his ear while presenting a Radio Clyde programme and be constantly encouraging you. As he would hit the mute button on the lazy, he would be in your ear. Great line, Tom, great line, keep it going, great pace, great tempo. And that brought the best out of you because you had someone, just giving you that wee bit of a poke, a prod, encouragement. So very fortunate to work with a lot of guys like that, over the years who I found terrifically helpful. They gave you enough responsibility to go and perhaps have your own culture, your own style to put in place rather than just be, I don't think I could ever be bland, even if I tried. But you do need to have a wee bit of your own character coming across in the broadcast. And a lot of that came just through encouragement by working with other guys over the years.
Yeah, and of course you work with a number of different co-commentators, Tom, all differing styles. How much do you enjoy that, and the sort of camaraderie and the banter that goes along with that as well?
Oh, terrific! It's a privilege again to be able to, build a relationship and a friendship with so many of these guys who were top players in the day. But it's not always the top player that makes the best co-commentator. Sometimes you just get a wee bit of chemistry that works, and on other occasions it doesn't quite. But a lot is determined by what's unfolding in front of you, how you see it, how you articulate and deliver that view of the match, particularly if you're doing a radio style commentary, differing to TV. A lot of the stuff we do at Rangers TV is still a bit of a hybrid, because we do offer an audio service and the pictures, and we have to find a wee bit of neutrality in the commentary somewhere there that kind of works for both, finding the right balance. But yeah, there was a spell not many years ago when it was almost as if every co-commentator we brought on board found themselves catapulted into the coaching team somewhere in the club. So you think back, Johan Johansson, who was outstanding, Peter Lovenkrands, both on the coaching staff, Kevin Thompson, Stevie Smith, Andy Little, even though Andy's no longer involved in coaching, he's chosen to go down a different route. And I think he'll be a terrific broadcaster in his own right. He's just started a couple of business ventures, which has restricted his commitment over the last few months. But I think in his own right, Andy could be a top commentator. So a lot of the guys we worked with there, and it was back to front probably, they were actually involved in the club media before they were involved in coaching at the club. It just gave them a platform to get back into the club, build relationships with other people at the club, and re-spark those relationships, and coaching opportunities came along. And everyone is different. Stevie Smith is probably the epitome of the modern coach, the viewpoint from a modern coach, the in and out of possession lines and break the lines, and the modern jargon. For an old dinosaur like me, he was educating me, and then you get Kevin Thompson, something similar, who just sees things from a different perspective to myself. So again, I can deliver a bit of the player's CV, a bit of what they're about, what they've done, and Kevin would just pick up the wee bit of unseen movement from players or whatever, the part they played in a move, not necessarily being on the ball, but just making runs off the ball that created space for others. Just things that guys that have played at the very top identify very quickly and are able to bring to the discussions. So everyone have their own ways of doing it. And over the years, it's been an absolute pleasure to have the company of so many of them. Everyone different, but everyone, I think, had their own culture, their own style, and everyone brought something a wee bit different and enhanced, for me, enhanced my job, but I hope it enhanced the listening or the viewing for those that were with us in these particular matches.
Yeah, it sure has. And Tom, you mentioned there, that, of course, a bit of a hybrid between the TV and the audio service. Is that a challenge? I know myself, we do the TV and the radio, and it can be a challenge for many. How do you sort of balance that?
It's not easy to balance, Derek, as you know, but you have to. My first broadcast as a commentator were radio, and it's hard to lose a radio style purely for a TV style. You do have to remember, of course, that those that are watching have their own eyes and they can see what's happening for themselves. So sometimes you just have to be cautious not to overcook it. I don't think I'm guilty of saying, down the right flank or in the old inside left channel, because they can see that. But I will try and give a position of where the play actually is on the field without being overly obvious, so that audio listeners, perhaps you do it by the tempo of the voice, as you speed it up, work through the gears as the chant starts to unfold in front of your eyes. That's the model to bring listeners with you rather than TV. So no one will get it right 100%. But what I hope to do is deliver a passion and an honesty. You can't please everyone. That's absolutely impossible. Every broadcaster in any sport will divide opinion, and you have to live with that opinion. But the sustainability I've enjoyed, the longevity in the gig suggests I've probably got more right than I've got wrong. But everyone makes errors along the way.
Yeah, certainly. And Tom, if you talk us through a typical match day then for you, when does it start and what does it look like?
Pretty much at the final whistle of the game before, Derek. That's when it starts effectively.
Yeah.
And when you consider, Rangers haven't played 65 games in the season just finished, or thereabouts. That's 65 games to prep. And an average game, well, you never use half the stuff you have. As you know from your own experience, you go a bit belt and braces, and you actually probably have more there than you would use in a match environment for the 90 minutes, or in Rangers' case, in the last 6 weeks, 120 minutes became a bit of a regular feature. So a Sunday game may finish, tea time. By the Monday morning, I'm starting to build the data for my next game, which could be the Wednesday if it's a domestic game, or the Thursday should be a European game. And I'll do it half an hour at a time, perhaps. But by the time the next game comes round, what I've written down, is pretty much locked in anyway. I don't really have to refer to it. But I do find the old-fashioned art of actually writing your notes down stands you in good stead. It pays a dividend that you've got it, and it comes out naturally rather than having to go and refer to it in a kind of more sterile culture. So from a match preparation perspective, each game there's probably around 3.5 hours of prep, I suspect. And then, as my partner Patricia will say, you can tell it's a match day. Tom's got his wiggle on, and isn't it? We all live for match days. In a typical Saturday, for instance, it might be an early kickoff, and on the Friday I'll book rolls and bacon for all the boys, and I'll go and pick them up on my way in, and they're all on the gantry waiting, arriving with the rolls and bacon for the crew of camera and sound guys and everyone else that goes with it. It just become a wee bit of a ritual now. 12 o'clock kickoff, that by 9:30 they know that Tom's in with the crispy rolls and bacon, or some may go daft and want a square sausage and even a potato scone on occasion. And it got to the stage that I was booking some like 20 rolls to take in one morning, and the roll shop in Copeland Road would say, "Now which ones have sauce?" So forget that. So when they start wanting the sauce, they need to bring it themselves. I'm not even going to try and remember that. So the wiggle starts at home, into the car, some tunes on in the car, get into Ibrox, get parked up after picking up the rolls, on the gantry, start debating what the team might look like today, scoff the bacon roll with a good coffee, and just start waiting on the news, waiting on the official team news. But of course, you ferret about to get as much information as you can, as early as you can. And it's just to get you in the front foot, isn't it, really? So, and then depending on what's happening, if there's a game with presentation, it's nice and easy for me. I don't get involved until the presenter, be it Emma perhaps or Becky Ives, throws to myself and co-commentator with 3 minutes short of the kickoff or whatever. Mm-hmm. If it's not a presentation game, I have to bring the opening to the broadcast and then do all the links. There'll be pre-recorded VT, and that might be a half hour or so. That again, it's an additional prep time where you've got to just not quite scripted, but you've got all the bullet points just to bring it together. And then when the game starts, you're oblivious to a crowd of 50,000 round about you. You just don't know they're there. There's a noise you can hear in your cans, but I couldn't differentiate what the songs or the chants or whatever are, because you're totally focused on what's unfolding in front of you. Then you have your monitors for replay, and you've got your monitors where you're actually watching two at once. One eye in the monitor, one eye in the live action, but you're following the camera, or vice versa. You hope the camera is following you on other occasions. So the concentration levels are pretty high. And again, it's down to experience. But the wiggle's there from leaving the house or before I've had my cornflakes or even left the house. And then, of course, when the game's finished, it's a quick chat with all the boys. How do we think it went? On to the next game. You come home, you chill out for a couple of hours, and then you prepare for the next one again. But I have found in recent years, midweek games in particular, I find it difficult to come down immediately after them. I don't know if that's something you experience, whether it's the adrenaline still rushing. This season, you look at some of the games,
the European games. Yeah.
You're coming home at 11 o'clock at night, you're still taking yourself off the ceiling. You've gone to bed 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, still wide awake. And, the image you have in your head is still all about some of these fantastic passages of play we just witnessed in the match the night before. So, very fortunate. And long may it continue. I'm of a vintage now, I should probably be doing less. Probably a lot of people agree with that. But I don't know. It's still just something we enjoy so much.
Yeah.
It was only a week ago today. I came back from Seville and I'm already flicking through the diary to count the days until when we're back in action. And I know we've got one fixture announced against Spurs. I'm thinking too early to start the prep, Tom. But I've been tempted to start looking at the Tottenham squad the last time they met. I could think the other day, I remember Gaza and Ian Ferguson had a real set to at Ibrox. I remember Jim Baxter coming back to Rangers after Nottingham Forest. And he was about my weight. All right, he's a bit taller. And people say I'm the correct weight for a man of my height, carrying a piano. But Jim Baxter came back to Rangers so out of condition, and they played Tottenham in a pre-season friendly, and he tried the most audacious overhead kick from the halfway line.
Wow.
It just sticks in my memory. Of course, he came back saying he was a foreign character. And within, I think, the night he put pen to paper, he signed at Rangers, he was stopped for drink driving. So, sadly, the promises. And Baxter was my first and remains my footballing hero of all time. It wasn't to be. Previous matches against Tottenham, that's just two images that are already bouncing about in my head. And it's more than a month, 6 weeks away, but even longer before you can go head to head with Tottenham. Thick end of 2 months.
That book, incidentally, folks, I've read your Jim Baxter book.
Right.
It's absolutely fantastic. So I'd recommend it, folks, if you've not read it already. In terms of the gantry, Tom, now, of course, the one at Ibrox is ideal, but you mentioned earlier on about going to the likes of Elgin and what have you. When Rangers were coming up through the leagues, did you have a few challenges going away to these small grounds in terms of
logistics? And you didn't have the same infrastructure. I remember being at Alloa, and it was snowing a hoolie, and taking refuge under the scaffolding which housed the main camera. Derek Johnson and I underneath it. You'd no height advantage. You didn't have a position that gave you a vista of the game particularly clearly. We were housed standing near the corner flag. Elgin was probably the highest gantry ever. We were sort of waving to passengers, taking off from Inverness Airport and heading to all points of the compass. It was like you needed an oxygen tank when you got to the top of the gantry. We were so high up. So there were some great challenges. The Brecon hedge in behind us as well, in what was like a pigeon loft. We were housed there. Back of the stand at Cowdenbeath with the chairman of Cowdenbeath, Donald Findlay, taking umbrage to something that Derek Johnson said, and stretching across 2 rows in the stand because they were housed in the back row of the stand, wanting to take Derek to task. So some great memories along the way, which again, when you think back, we've just competed in a European final and came within a whisker of winning our second European trophy. And not that many years ago, we were going to places like Forfar, Elgin. It's just amazing journeys. Stranraer, But some of these people were so welcoming, Eric,
Yes.
and it was, you know, great to go along and see how the other half lived.
Yes.
For want of a better term. And 9 times out of 10, they were all so welcoming. They couldn't do enough for you. And I think it says a lot about the way that the guys from Rangers TV also went about their business. They really represented the club with dignity. They went there and they respected the host club that we were about to broadcast from. There was no one with a really big shot. There was no one going down there beating the table and demanding certain levels of support or whatever. We were all in it together, and most of the host clubs we visited were more than welcoming and went out their way to make sure that everything went to plan.
Yeah. You speak about the longevity in the job, Tom, and you're a much loved figure with regards to Rangers. But with the social media, I know myself that you can't please everyone. Is that something that negative comments that you pay attention of, or do you just sort of shut them out and just carry on with the job?
You got to respect someone that doesn't fancy what you do. What you can't do, Derek, is let it get to you. And you know, guys I've worked with in the past always said, don't read social media. It'll drive you around the twist, particularly when they're, you know, faceless and they're hiding behind a non-plume. You know, don't take it on board. But yeah, you want to be liked, you want to be favoured, you want to hopefully entertain and satisfy everyone. But I don't think that perfect broadcaster exists anywhere right now. You know, everyone have their own ideas. Everyone thinks they could do it, but it's not as easy a gig as that. As I say, I'm just very fortunate I've been able to do it. I give it my best shot. If it's not good enough for certain people, I hold my hands up and say, I'm sorry. But I think, you know, if you were to boil it down, I think 80-20, the old Pareto rule, that perhaps 80% are relatively satisfied, the other 20% are split between on the fence and the most definite not for me. But I don't think that would ever change, you know. And don't let it get you. Just do your best. Kevin Thompson has a great saying, which is be the best you can be. And I also, over the last couple of years, have tried to treat every game as this could be the last, and go and enjoy it along the way as well. Because one day it will be the last, and you may not necessarily know it until after the event. So do your best. Everyone will make mistakes. Be honest, and I think I try to be honest. I'm approachable, engageable. If somebody wants to debate it with me, you'll find me on Twitter. I'm more than happy. Meet me outside the stadium. I'll have a chat, and you know, I'll be honest and say I'm sorry if it doesn't suit. Tell me what you would prefer me to do. I'm happy to take advice. If you think there's something that I don't do well or something that's missing of what I try and offer, let me know. And over the years, you've tried a few different things, and some work, some don't. So you either drop them or expand them along the way. You know, in the third division, some of the football was so slow and laborious. We needed somewhere to go for a chat. So, you know, we did shout outs predominantly for Rangers supporters clubs, particularly those in NARSA, the North American supporters clubs, who incidentally host their Vegas convention next week, which should be I'm not going, it should be an absolute blast, and I wish them every success. They're getting a fair turnout of former players, I believe. I have been to NARSA before, and it's a real experience. So yeah, you know, we would go through all the clubs, and if anyone was on holiday visiting Orlando or wherever, we would take a minute and just promote that particular club each week so that people could go and catch Rangers games should they be in certain areas throughout the country. But it helped to extend the broadcast because, let's be candid, some of the football was pretty turgid at times, pedestrian. So you tried a few other things just to keep a bit of spark and a bit of movement in the commentary. And now people will still come and ask for a shout out. But it's almost impossible because the game bears no resemblance to what we watched when we were taking on Albion Rovers or whatever. The game is played at a much higher tempo, and there is just no capacity to take your eye off the action for a moment to give a shout out the Joe who's watching in Queensland, in Australia, kind of thing, you know. So, but it's all about the fans. It's a channel for fans, by fans, and I like to think we try and strike a balance between professionalism and a fan view. And again, that is a fine line to walk at times as well. We've got Ofcom to satisfy as well, and one or two Ofcoms I've been along with. I'm thinking, oh my God, we could be in trouble here, you know. However, as I say, it's for fans, but the game has changed dramatically in that period.
In terms of that, though, Tom, I mean, it must be mind-blowing knowing that there's people watching you, listening to you all around the globe as well. Like you say, people in Australia, all over the place. I mean, the fan base is massive, isn't it? So it must be quite humbling to know that they're all tuning in.
Derek, I've been so fortunate that I've been invited as a guest of Rangers supporters clubs from Toronto, Perth in Australia, Naples in Florida, the European experience in Athens, all with hugely active Rangers supporters clubs, and been along and enjoyed their company, and just the love, the affection, and the commitment these people, predominantly expats or sometimes even second or third generation expats, have for Rangers Football Club just blows your mind. You know, the clocks are irrelevant. You know, they'll be up at 3 a.m. in Australia. Set alarms to get up and watch a Rangers game, you know. I'm so passionate about it, and a privilege to just be able to say that, you know, you met some of these people along the way and share that passion with them and share the experiences of football. That I mentioned that first ever game in 1999, Rangers versus Sunderland, which incidentally Alec Ray played for Sunderland at that time. Another whose experience of Rangers TV co-coms, and now doing very well, of course. He's shifted to BT. Anyway, the day after the game, I got a call from Rangers saying, "Do you have an email?" Well, it was 1999. Being honest, I didn't have an email, and they said, "Well, we've had an email, and we'll fax it to you." And Rangers sent me a fax, Eric, and it read, "Can you tell me if Tom Miller on commentary used to live at 45 Aylesbury Road, Coatbridge?" I did. I'm sure he used to live next door to my mother and father. I haven't seen him or spoken to him in 25 years. Wow. I qualified as an accountant, moved to Hong Kong. I'm now in Calgary, Canada, in my office, listening to the game today. My name is Tom Christie. Could you check with Tom? P.S. I'm a Celtic fan. 1999, Derek. A Celtic fan from Coatbridge, no shock there. Lived next door to me. He was a great lad too, used to play football and things together. He was a wee bit older than I. Now, a qualified accountant, sitting in his office in Calgary, Canada, recognised it was me, despite not having spoken in 25 years. And in the bottom, P.S. I'm a Celtic fan. Also just tells you that this obsession isn't particularly...
Yeah. They're all subscribers and tuning in, that's for sure. Tom, in terms of special moments, and I know it's a difficult question, you've covered so many games, but behind the microphone, is there any moments that stick out for you that was just an absolute joy to commentate on?
There's been so many, Derek, it's hard to pin down, you know, into single figures.
Yeah.
But there is, apart from last Wednesday in Seville, which was just such an experience.
Yeah.
Having, in the intensity of the heat, you have to respect the players delivering in that environment and the fans who are outstanding as well. And I feel for them not being able to hydrate in those conditions.
Yeah,
I was in the stadium around 5:30 for what was effectively a 9 o'clock kickoff, and we finished broadcasting just after midnight, after the penalty shootout. Never moved from our Gantu position, and it took a mountain boat to get up the what was terraces converted to broadcast areas. So that in itself was such an experience, and will never be forgotten. Sadly, the whole European story this year came with a twist in the tail at the very last chapter that no one saw coming. But a fantastic experience. Many other matches, you know, I'm going to pick one. The last domestic cup trophy won by Rangers prior to the cup final against Hearts. 2011 at Hampden Park. Stephen Davis scored. Stephen Davis lost the show again on Saturday past. And Nikica Jelavic got the winner. He made a call against Celtic, the League Cup final of 2011 in added on time, extra time. Quick free kick taken by Vladimir Weiss. Saw the opportunity just to roll in. Jelavic, who lifted his head, knocked it off one post. The ball almost did a Yuri Geller and came away from the goal line, kissed the inside of the post on the other side. Hampden held his breath. The Rangers fans to my left were trying to blow the ball over the line. The Celtic fans behind the goal were trying to blow the ball away from the goal. It was a moment where time stood still, and Hampden fell silent for what seemed like an eternity. It was probably 3 or 4 seconds as every eye in Hampden watched the ball journey from the inside of one post to the other before going across the line, then to the net, and Rangers won 2-1 that day. And it was a very special moment. I think I did the game with John Brown, and we were going through the motions of celebration, and we realised right behind us was the Celtic fans in the corporate area of Hampden. We were distraught because I think they were thinking it's not going to go in. Everyone, from a Rangers perspective, was willing the ball into the net, and it went in. It's one of those special moments that sticks with you. And what probably made it even more interesting for me, Eric, I have some other business interests. And the week leading up to that final, I had gone to India on business on the Monday morning. I flew back from India via Amsterdam on the Friday, covered the game on the Sunday at Hampden, and I was on the 5:50 flight on Monday morning, back out of Edinburgh to Schiphol and on to Delhi. So effectively, I was home for the weekend, which allowed me to do the game at Hampden to see Rangers win the Cup 2-1 against Celtic, and then I was on my way back to India for another week while working out there for a couple of projects I'd been working on. So that one is probably up there along the way. If you can maybe see anything round about me just now, to my right, up there, I've got the programme signed by Derek.
Oh, you whip it up a wee bit more. You can. There we can see it. Yep, got it.
It's the League Cup final of 1970.
Yeah.
Over here on the back wall, we've got the first ever international I went to was Scotland. It's a red programme cover again above the legend that's George Best, and it was the first Scotland international I went to. Scotland versus Italy at Hampden. The 1970 League Cup finals been personalised by Derek Johnson, the 16-year-old at the time. He got the goal. Scotland programme was against Italy. It was a World Cup qualifier. 1965. Scotland won 1-0. John Gregg got the only goal of the game. 2-1-2s with Jim Baxter to carve open the Italian defence. And John has very kindly personalised that one there.
Wow.
It's alongside the Barcelona signed shirt along the way. And that was my first international experience at Hampden, which was hugely memorable. We went to Naples for the second leg against Italy and got really turned over, I think, 3-0 or 3-1, and that was the end of the dream to go and compete in the England World Cup of 1966. But the programme's there as a permanent reminder. Likewise, Big Derek. There's a few other wee bits of memorabilia, but it's not something I'm big on. But the Rangers signed shirt from the 1972 Barcelona squad was gifted to me by Colin Jackson's widow after Colin died, and we had a service for him back at Ibrox, and I was asked to say 10 minutes, and she gifted me that, which I'll always be treasured. Yeah.
That leads us nicely on, actually, Tom, because I was going to say you've released your book a few months or so ago, Barcelona. Looking back at that greatest triumph, we were all hoping that Seville would be probably a different book for you to write. But in terms of Barcelona, how much of a joy was that to write a book sort of commemorating the greatest Rangers team of all time?
Yeah, it was terrific, Derek. I had the notion a couple of years ago when I realised that 50 years was coming up round the corner since the Barcelona success of 1972. I had a couple of previous efforts published. I put it to the publisher, and they said, "Great idea, let's go for it." So it was titled Barcelona, the Greatest Day in Rangers History. And as you've alluded to there, I thought we were going to have to do a phase 2. Another great day in Rangers history, Seville, scheduled for release in 2072. Not that I'd be around that length of time. But huge disappointment, obviously, last Wednesday. Nothing would have given me more pleasure than to see my title of Barcelona, perhaps, diluted a wee bit. But I just feel that we don't cherish our heroes enough, Eric. And again, privileged to have a good relationship with guys like Colin, Willie Johnston, Dave Smith, who's a terrific gentleman, Billy Matheson, the same, Peter McCloy, John Gregg, that whole squad, absolutely terrific Rangers. And I just felt that we didn't do enough to herald the success of that era and recognise the commitment made by these guys. Sure, some of them still do lounge work and things on a match day at Ibrox and meeting fans, and they do it with such, commitment and enthusiasm that it really should be acknowledged. So I felt with 50 years coming up round the corner, it was a good opportunity to go and revisit that campaign. And when you go back under the surface and you see some of the things that happened, the revolutionary tactics of the high press, the jargon of the 21st century, what was an innovation by Jock Wallace and Willie Waddle, particularly away from home, where they harried opponents, didn't let them settle, so much so that Rennes in the early exchanges of the tournament, first round of the tournament, said it was anti-football. So here we were, 1972, 71, in fact, it would be at that stage. The Rangers were christened as anti-footballers because the way they went about their job. But they had this desire, they had a shape that worked for them so well, and it was all about the beating heart of the team. Guys like Alex McDonald, not letting opponents get on the ball whatsoever. So that was something that was a great reminder that it was all these years ago, but it was something new to the game at that time. He then had the absolute bonkers scenario of the Sporting Lisbon where Rangers were eliminated on spot kicks. And then it was realised spot kicks were unnecessary, that Willie Henderson's goal in extra time to make it 6-6, as was, counted double, and Rangers were actually through. So they'd gone through the trauma and emotions and believing they were out. And, Sporting were celebrating, thinking they were through. And it took John Fairgrieve, who was a renowned reporter in the Scottish game at that time, to head to the Rangers dressing room with the book of rules from UEFA to tell Willie Waddle, the referee's got this wrong. And the result was overturned. Rangers were through. They then took on the poster boys of Turin in the quarterfinals. Everyone fancied Turin. They were, gazillionaires by comparison to the Rangers' budget. And again, Rangers deployed the same tactics in their face. Didn't let them play. Willie Johnson again on target. Alec McDonald just came alive in that environment. Then the big one, Bayern Munich, who they'd lost the 67 final to and were perennial opponents, went to Germany, didn't let the game breathe, got a battering, an absolute battering in the first leg, but came back with a 1-1 draw to take them on at Ibrox. John Gregg missing in action because of an injury. Derek Parlin at 19 makes his debut. Derek Johnson slotted into midfield that night as well. Colin Jackson played at the back with Dave Smith. Ron McKinnon had broken his leg in Lisbon. Everyone fans saying Bayern Munich. Rangers 2-up after 20 minutes. Again, same night, Celtic in Glasgow. Halcyon days for Scottish football. And when you read the story now, you think, sure, that didn't happen. Celtic, Rangers, same night in Glasgow. Thick end of 120,000 fans at two matches, 6 or 7 miles apart. How would they cope? And Bayern Munich, Rangers knew they had been rattled. When you look at the quality on that side, Sepp Maier, it was almost the German international side. Sepp Maier, Beckenbauer, Müller, Overath. When Beckenbauer started passing the ball out the park, you knew they had to rattle. And then the final itself in Barcelona, where Rangers, and people tend to forget, Rangers suffered a 2-year ban immediately after the final because of the scenes that were witnessed on the pitch, where the fans, over enthusiasm, over exuberance, had come onto the pitch. Willie Waddle met UEFA head on that one and had the ban reduced to a year. And then it was kind of all changed. Within 3 weeks, he moved upstairs, gave the manager's job to Jock Wallace. He struggled a bit in the first instance, couldn't wrestle the title away from Celtic, but was soon delivering treble. So, a terrific period in the history of the club. Can't believe it's 50 years ago. And I just felt it was a good opportunity to raise awareness again of the characters of that team. And one of the most enjoyable parts of putting the book together, Eric, was I went and had lunch with the goal scorers in Barcelona. Steen scored 1, Willie Johnson scored 2, and we met, and it was just as lockdown was starting to ease. And we met in a wee bistro in South Queensferry, right on the front, and they had a tent outside, and you could have alcohol in the kind of tented part of it. You couldn't drink alcohol inside. And it's well documented. Colin Steen likes a glass of red, and Willie Johnson likes a half pint of lager. And I was driving, so and having picked him up, we went across, and I'd booked lunch for 2. It's 7 o'clock. We're still sitting outside, and I just let the boat run, and it was amazing. And I came back. I thought I have to edit that into a chapter or 2. But no, I'm just going to put it out as a transcript. Tom said, he said, Bud said. Tom said, Steenie said, Bud said, and it went out slightly edited. some of the less savoury adjectives removed, but it was an education sitting with the boys, rolling years, and they were talking about their teammates, what made them special. I then had the privilege to host a dinner at the end of February for the Barcelona Bears, and to see the camaraderie in these guys now, Derek, 50 years on, it really was a really emotional event. No longer have Sandy Jabin, obviously, also from the squad. Jerry Neath, the changed goalkeeper, is no longer with us. Andy Penman, who was such a talented footballer, died in his early 50s as well. Colin Jackson, who was part of the squad. So just to have time with the guys and host a dinner, and we had such a terrific turnout from them. And some of the other younger players who were just coming through at the time that didn't feature in the final but were part of the squad, like Alex Miller, etc., was very special. And I'm delighted the book's been well received. It's since come back out now in paperback format, so I must have hit the number threshold. And I think for younger Rangers fans that have only heard the tales, I hope it was educational, enlightening, and a wee bit entertaining along the way. It's all about facts, and some of the twists and turns on the journey to win the trophy in Barcelona are pretty special in the extreme.
Yeah, Barcelona, the greatest day in the history of Rangers FC, folks. I'd recommend you go and check it out. You mentioned heroes there, Tom. Unfortunately, we sadly lost 2 in the season just past in Jimmy Bell and Walter Smith. In terms of memories of those 2, what would they like to be in and around during your time at the club?
My memories of Walter, perhaps, are more about when I was working elsewhere rather than doing stuff at Rangers. I remember Easter Road, and I was doing Scotsport, and the whisper was he was wanting to sign Kirk Broadfoot. And post-match, I was interviewing Walter from Scotsport, and I said, "What's the latest on your endeavours to sign Kirk Broadfoot?" I got the look. You know the look? I got the look. I don't want to talk about that. And walked away. So that one sticks with Walter, and he was an absolute gentleman, but it was fine lines.
Yeah,
you dare not cross. He didn't suffer fools, that's for sure, but he was honest as the day's long, and a terrific family man. When you saw him with his grandkids on occasion after the match inside Ibrox, and I remember he has a couple of twin grandsons to his son Neil, and a couple of boys to his other son Stephen. And I remember the boys would only be 4 years of age or whatever, and I'm in the tunnel to do some post-match or whatever. And Walter came out with the 2 wee flame-haired twin boys, and one said to Papa, "Take us down to the big garden and let's get the ball out." And the big garden, of course, was nothing short of the hallowed Ibrox turf.
Yeah.
That was Walter would go out and kick the ball about on the pitch with his grandsons, and he was never happier when you saw him in that mode. Such a committed football man. He knew, of course, that his own sons, Neil and Stephen, probably suffered. His wife, Ethel, felt a lot because of his commitment to his football career. And I think he recognised that latterly, and he tried to put that right by spending so much time with his grandkids. A huge loss to the Smith family and friends, and of course the whole Rangers family, taken far too soon. Yeah. Jimmy Bell was a one-off. I mean, no one was more committed to a low-profile job within a football club than Jimmy Bell was. Nothing was a trouble. He set standards. He was a confident. People could go and speak to him off the record. He would quietly take players aside and say, "You need to look what you're doing, away from the game." Mm-hmm. He just got the whole Rangers message and wasn't shy in imparting that to anyone that had any affiliation to the club whatsoever. He had a type of curmudgeon, outgoing persona, which wasn't always true. He could put the face on, when necessary. But underneath it all, he had a heart of gold and would have done anything for anybody. And again, such a sad loss. But the club have recognised both these gentlemen and characters and the contribution they've made, and they'll not be forgotten. That's for sure.
Yeah, they certainly won't be. That'll do us there, Tom. I know you're very active on social media. If people want to maybe find you on Twitter, how can they do so?
Tom, I don't know. How do you find it? At Tom Commentator. That's the one. It's a great forum, and I've made some great acquaintances along the way there. I've had some absolute moments of terror from many other areas along the way as well. But hey, we all love the game, and we shouldn't forget that. Whatever we do, we'll all have an absolute affinity and love for the game, and long may that continue. Let's keep as banter, if that's what it is. Support our teams whichever way we want. Enjoy it. We've just had a terrific competitive football season there, culminating with Rangers winning their first domestic cup since 2011. Coming so close in Europe along the way. Celtic a wind of change with a new manager. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst now has another transfer window and a pre-season. They stamp his own authority on the squad. It's a mouth-watering prospect of what's coming up around the corner. Perhaps someone coming straight out the Championship, look a different proposition. Aberdeen and Hibernian need to go and reinvent themselves. They've dropped off the radar. They're better than results suggest. We do know it's going to be a two-horse race again next season, is more than likely. But 55 titles, we want more. We hope Celtic's only got a wee loan of it again when we go again.
Yeah, and hopefully we're back in a European final before too long as well. So that's the dream, of course. Well, Tom, it's been great having you on. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, Derek. Thank you for inviting me along, and hope to catch up